Good morning, it's really good to be here with you this morning. I'm just going to share a little bit with you what I've learnt in lockdown, and I'm particularly going to focus on what I've learnt about prayer. As you will have known if you've been watching these services over the last few weeks, the church as a whole has been following the prayer course that comes out through 24/7 prayer and is online for everybody to participate in free of charge. But it was interesting early in lockdown that because I live in a countryside location, that I could go out on a lot of walks, and I have to confess I did do a little more than my 30 minutes once a day, but I really didn't see anyone. And so I used to really cherish these times to just go walking for an hour or so. And I hardly ever saw anybody during these walks, just to reassure you that I wasn't causing anyone any risk. And it was interesting that when I first started doing this, I found myself with my mind thinking about family and friends and people that I was seeing on the news that were suffering from COVID, learning about some of the mental health issues that are arising for some people and the pressures that it had put on them during the lockdown. And as I was just thinking about these things, I suddenly realised that I was just naturally praying for them, and that I found that a very sort of easy and natural thing to do as I was walking. We then began to look at the prayer course with, for me, it was with the house group, and we went through all the different videos. And very early on, I think it was in about week 3, which is way back in May, there was a particular video which used an acronym PRAY, which of course spells pray. And the PRAY each stood for a word, and the P stood for pause, the R for rejoice, the A for asking, and the Y for yielding. And right from the day after we had met in house group, and we'd seen that as part of the prayer course sort of guidance that might help some people to pray, I immediately put it into action and tried for the next few days, sitting and pausing and relaxing before I thought of things to thank God for and rejoicing and to praise Him for, before I started on my list of wishes and wants and asking. And that asking part was what I'd been doing on my walks. I'd been asking for people who are suffering from COVID. I'd been asking for protection for my family, and particularly for my dad, who's 88. I'd been asking for, things to work out at work, which was being a little bit of a headache at the time for me as a manager. And so there were lots of things I was asking for. So that still came into my prayer time when I was trying to do that first thing in the morning. And then each day, the Y of that pray meant yielding. And I found that the simple line of, I offer my day to you, Lord, was all I could sort of manage at the beginning. And so with this guideline, I started spending perhaps a little bit more time than I had in the past, and perhaps in a little bit more of a regular fashion than I want to do under normal circumstances, to spend some time first thing in the morning to pray with this acronym as my guideline. Obviously, during lockdown, I had the complete honour of working from home, a very privileged position. I wasn't put on furlough or anything. It had its own struggles and its own battles, but it meant I could really construct my day, making sure I was given all the hours I needed to work, but I could organise it in a way that suited me. And I found that I could spend some time first thing in the morning. Very rarely did that mean I started work late. It just meant I organised my time a little better. And I used to use this PRAY framework for my prayer. And then I could organise in late afternoon, when I'd done my allotted hours of work, to go out walking and have this conversational prayer time. During lockdown, and particularly in those early weeks of lockdown, I can honestly say I probably prayed more personal prayer time with God than I had done for years. I'm very passionate about prayer, but I'm not ever so good at the discipline of spending time with God in a sort of allotted way. But it was interesting that whilst walking, I found prayer so easy. I didn't find it was something I felt like I needed to do. I didn't feel like I was putting aside particular time for it. And yet it was by far the most natural praying I've probably ever done in my life. And so the major thing I think I've discovered about prayer during the lockdown is that it is something that can be done at any time of the day, doing anything. And sometimes the most mundane of tasks. And as one of our house group members said, often she prays while she's hanging out the washing. It's something that she can do without a lot of thought, but it then enables her to have that time and that freedom to talk to God. And that's what I discovered walking. And now I find it very difficult not to be praying as I walk on my own. And it was that solitary walking that made that discovery for me. So I hope that every time I go walking in future years and future times, and I'm doing that walking on my own, that I will find that I will continue to pray and have that conversation with God. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate God's creation previously. I was very often saying thank you to God for the beautiful views or the sunshine or the nature that I was seeing. But the walking that I've done during lockdown, it became a personal conversation. And it was like having Jesus at my side as my walking companion, rather than as a God of creation up there in the skies or flying with the birds overhead or in the beauty of the cornfields ahead of me. I learnt to be much more personal with God in those days and in a more consistent way. What I've learnt since I've had to start going back to work, and my day time seems to get squeezed a little more with it just travelling to work, and things have got back to normal a little bit more, although not completely. I very quickly found that quiet time in the morning slipping slightly, and I had to retrieve it back. I had to have the discipline of making myself get up a little earlier and making time for that as well. Because I found it was important not just to have the conversational prayer that I discovered during lockdown, but also to really maintain this space for God at the beginning of my day. And the reason why I felt that I wanted to do it at the beginning of the day so much and not at the end of the day, not that there's any rights or wrongs about that, but it was just that I felt that yielding part of the PRAY was really important to offer my day to God and say that whatever was coming, could he please ensure that I reflected his nature and not my own. So that was in dealings with folk at work. That would be in the way my mind was working about people at work. It would mean in my actions towards people and in the way he directed my thoughts. Now that's all going to sound very easy, I suppose, and wonderful, and you may be listening to this and thinking, oh, I haven't had any experiences like that during lockdown. Or maybe you think, surely Sharon prays and has a sort of special quiet time every morning and has always done all of her life. And I think that's the impression that we get about a lot of us, that lots of us are far more disciplined than we truly are very often. And it is easy for us to squeeze God into the corners of our lives and forget that he wants to be in the middle of them. And whether that's that conversational prayer when we're doing other things, but we can still focus on him, or whether that's time that we set aside, all of those times have value. And I just feel that my entire experience of prayer has gone into a completely different realm during this time. And it is something that I believe I may not have ever discovered had it not been for lockdown. I think lockdown has made a platform for many of us to feel our real dependence on God. And perhaps for those who live in households where we are not sharing our space and we haven't had to contend with demanding children or partners, or haven't had to go out and do lots of work for other people, maybe because we're shielding, or maybe because we were being careful, or maybe our families are far away. I think for those of us who perhaps had a little more solitary time, we maybe have found that we've had to depend on Jesus to be our friend and our company a little more than perhaps we have done in the past. I certainly have found that, and I know that particularly my prayer life has grown exponentially as a result. Thank you for listening, and I just leave you with that thought of PRAY, pause. Have a little bit of reflection time, a little bit of silence, if that's possible in your household. have a little bit of rejoicing, a little bit of thanks time, just starting your prayer with praise for who God is, thanks for what he's done, rejoicing in anything that you can find that's positive, even on the roughest of days and when the roughest of things are happening. And then think of the people that you want to raise up either into intercessional prayer for others, or maybe it's things for yourself that you're really desiring God to meet. Maybe it's about unanswered prayer and just offering it to God and asking him to take it and show you maybe why it can't be answered, or why you need to wait patiently. And then just yield to what God wants you. And that could be time just holding your hands out and saying, Lord, I offer myself. Tell me where you want me to go, what you want me to do. Or it might be just offering in a single sentence, which is very often now in my mornings. I very often just say, Lord, take today and let me reflect you. May I be a true disciple for you, and shine your light wherever I am, in my thoughts and in my actions. May God bless you all. And just if any of that's rung true with you, then just give it a go. And if you want to learn more, as Keith has week after week since we've been doing the prayer course, just go to 24/7 prayer and find that prayer course and find out for yourself. There may be other things in that prayer course which just connect with you and that will help you to build on your prayer life. Thank you.